The National Council of Educational Research and Training is an important organization in India. It is a body whose published books are studied by millions of children in India at schools. In fact, NCERT books are used in all CBSE schools of the country. So it is safe to say that the body has an uncomfortable monopoly over the young and impressionable minds of children. Already, NCERT books, their content, particularly the history curriculum of the council, has come under intense scrutiny in recent years. Now, a shameless NCERT has decided to go fully woke in order to morally deracinate Indian civilization as a whole. Hi and welcome. This is TFI English, the National Socio-Political Analysis arm of the TFI Media Group. I am your host Isha, and in this video I will tell you how NCERT is importing USA's wokeness. Let's begin. NCERT has released a new publication titled Inclusion of Transgender Children in School Education, Concerns and Roadmap. The training material explains concepts such as gender identity, gender incongruence, gender dysphoria, gender affirmation, gender expression, gender conformity, gender variance, heterosexuality, homosexuality, asexuality, bisexuality, transnegativity, amongst various others through a detailed glossary. The new publication calls for the use of gender-neutral terms and pronouns within schools and also advocates the usage of puberty blockers, which are essentially hormones that impair the normal developmental course of a human adolescent. The objective of the training manual is the sensitization of teachers and teacher educators regarding aspects of gender diversity, keeping gender non-conforming and transgender children at center stage. In this brazen document, the NCERT has also advocated for the use of gender-neutral infrastructure in schools in order to prevent children from growing up with normalized gender stereotypes. The document says, the use of toilet and infrastructural facility is used to condition children into binary gender. Female children are conditioned to use the toilets labeled girls and male children are to use the toilet marked for boys. It adds, therefore, presence of binaries in infrastructure also creates conflicts for gender non-conforming children who find it difficult to make a choice at such a young age. It is an emotionally charged decision that additionally burdens them. Among its many suggestions to turn India into a gender non-conforming circus is this recommendation: discontinuance of binary practices in school, classroom activities, sports, etc. Separate rows for boys and girls during assembly, school functions, seating arrangements in classroom, gender-wise separate uniforms, working group for assignments, excursions, etc. should be discontinued. Mixed groups should be allowed, gender-neutral uniforms can be introduced, etc. Meanwhile, stigma against the transgender community is blamed on caste patriarchy by NCERT. NCERT is playing into the hands of certain global powers by pushing for such gender-centered nonsense in India. The liberal war on size has landed in India, and NCERT promises to be its biggest advocate. For NCERT to publish a document as brazen as this one and expect teachers and school staff to be sensitized accordingly is basically a diktat that will ensure that gender non-conformity becomes a tool against the nation in the long term. Communist countries of the world pushed for human rights as a fundamental Marxist principle while themselves violating such rights day in and day out. The concept was adopted by the United States, which then shoved it down the throats of all developing nations and democracies around the world like a neo-colonial tool. Today, the biggest violators of human rights are also its biggest advocates. Similar gender-related unscientific buncombe is making its way out of the USA into all countries of the world, and the consequences promise to be devastating. India, on its part, should have had the far-sightedness to block this invasion of its culture. India has a long and glorious history of accepting gender fluidity, not as a taboo, but instead as a normal phenomenon that requires no special attention. India's ancient gender fluidity concepts are rooted in the realities of the subcontinent. They are not unscientific, and neither are they a guaranteed way for ensuring the mass deracination of Indians. The Modi government should have been focused on blocking the import of unscientific gender jargon from America into our country. Instead, going by the confidence of NCERT in publishing the said document, it seems the Council has the tacit backing of the central government. Indians should not be forced to study liberals' unfounded takes on gender and sex. The West's efforts of colonizing the minds of India's youth need to be prevented, not encouraged and adopted. Liberals have come up with brazen concepts of gender identities and ridiculous random and haphazard explanations for the same, which simply put are non-biological in nature. What started as the LGBTQ movement became an LGBTQI1, which then progressed on to become LGBTQIA+. Now ask a liberal how many genders they think there are, and they will say there can be an umpteen number of gender identities. So there are definitely not as many genders as they think there are, but there are definitely innumerable identities that people can associate with. This collective degeneracy goes in brazen contempt of science and natural biology. To somehow artificially create these identities, liberals have begun pushing for hormonal therapy, which essentially means pumping sex hormones into a person to artificially change their gender, despite the fact that they have naturally been born either as a male, female, or a transgender. India has much to learn from countries like France, which are comprehensively rejecting American propaganda on gender as well as acceptance of Islamists as normal humans. France is pursuing its own agenda and is doing what it thinks is best for itself. Similarly, it is time for India to pull its socks up. The Modi government needs to recognize the threat posed to India by such American nonsense in the name of gender neutrality and non-conformity. India's sex ratio will stand destabilized very soon if we go all out in an acceptance of such American ideas of gender and sex. The push for liberal gender studies, experimentation, and non-conformity need to be viewed as a national security threat immediately.